Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Monday, January 27th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Law enforcement agencies are caught in the middle as Donald Trump enters his second term in office. That's because Trump is looking to local law enforcement agencies to help carry out his immigration agenda.
We do not support the rounding up of just innocent migrant workers, but as long as you're here identifying wanted, known bad people, then you're welcome in the county.
Coming up, we'll speak with the sheriff of Tulare County to hear his own priorities. But first, today's headlines. A faction of the Fresno County Republican Party is being asked to renounce recent election victories. This follows a dispute over who was elected to lead the party. A lawyer representing the Fresno County Republican Party Central Committee sent a cease and desist letter to several party members. Peter Halajian is recognized by some as the chairperson, but the letter calls for Halajian and 4 others to publicly renounce their claims of victory. Incumbent Chair Liz Kolstad also claimed victory as chairperson. Both party factions scheduled competing member meetings for this week. Fresno police officers were involved in a shooting near Fresno State this weekend. The officers were chasing a vehicle with 3 men inside on Sunday morning. Police received reports earlier that morning that the men had allegedly broken into a nearby apartment. They'd falsely claimed to be police. Mindy Casto is Fresno's interim police chief.
This doesn't happen a lot, especially with people identifying themselves as police. So, there's going to be a lot more to this story, but we're going to be working to determine what actually happened here.
One suspect was injured in the police encounter. Authorities are investigating whether the suspects also fired weapons. A rifle was found near their vehicle. 2 of the suspects are accounted for, while 1 is still missing. The Altadena Seed Library is helping regrow the neighborhood after the deadly Eaton fire, one pot and plant at a time. McKenna Sievertson from our California newsroom partner, LAist, has more.
The little wooden boxes are looking for donations, specifically native plant seeds that help restore the ecosystem, and those that attract birds who can distribute seeds on their own. Founder Nina Raj says she's moved by how Altadena has come together after the fire.
The metaphor, too, of regrowing our neighborhood is really powerful for me. And so I would offer that to anybody who's having a difficult time accessing hope.
She says seeds represent the future, and the most meaningful donation would be something you've collected or grown yourself.
That was LAist McKenna Sievertson. Massive fires burning across LA County are prompting action in at least one valley city. Bakersfield Vice Mayor Manpreet Kaur has asked city staff to draft a so-called fire master plan. The Bakersfield Californian reports it would include a new fire station and beef up the city's water infrastructure. Kaur said several constituents have reached out to her office asking about the city's fire readiness. Other council members echoed Kaur's concerns. The Bakersfield Fire Department says it's preparing a plan as soon as possible.
KVPR's vehicle donation program brings in thousands of dollars each month to support the news and information you rely on. If you've got a car, truck, motorcycle, or boat you're no longer using, please consider donating it. The process is easy. We'll tow it away free of charge, KVPR gets a check, and you'll get a receipt for your taxes. Find out more at kvpr.org/cars or call 855-277-2346.
And now to our main story. Deportations and other immigration enforcement policies are front and center 1 week into President Trump's second term in office. Just last week, an updated federal policy on immigration gave immigration officers permission to arrest any immigrant in the country without legal status. That includes conducting arrests at hospitals, churches, and schools, known as, quote, sensitive areas. It's a reversal of a 2011 federal policy. News of immigration enforcement operations have swept the country, instilling fear in different communities. Today we're talking with Tulare County Sheriff Mike Boudreaux. He has served in the role since 2013 and grew up in the Valley. He shared with us that he, too, has friends who are considered undocumented. But he's also balancing state and federal rules. Trump's calling on law enforcement officials like him to assist in the deportation efforts. California law, meanwhile, prohibits law enforcement agencies from cooperating with immigration officers. But Boudreaux says a more nuanced point of view is needed when talking about immigration enforcement. He starts our conversation by sharing where deportation priorities should be.
So when we talk about mass deportation, first off, that really instills a lot of fear into a bunch of people, especially in the central San Joaquin Valley, right here in the center of California. We have a lot of migrant workers that are farm workers, and they're here and working, and for no other means, they're not violating any laws other than, obviously, the federal laws of immigration. But we also have a large-scale number of people all through the state of California. I can't speak for everywhere, but I do have contacts all across the country where we know that there is criminals who are wanted by the federal government because of violence, egregious acts, human trafficking, and the like. And so what we're seeing is not at this moment a mass deportation. I think that's a narrative that needs to be cleaned up. But what we have is law enforcement identifying those wanted and known violent felons, egregious activity of criminal nature, meaning human trafficking, sex trafficking, drug running, gun running, and the like. Those people who are identified and wanted, that's who they're going after. That's who they are going to identify first.
Give us a sense of Tulare County. It's a top dairy producer in the country. It's got a lot of farm workers, and many farm workers could be at risk of falling under immigration enforcement orders. Just in your years as sheriff, what have you learned about this community, and how do you think your community specifically is going to fare as we navigate these kinds of uncharted waters?
I think that's a really great question, because there's a balance here between our economic stability as well as the stability of our farmland and our farming operations that really rely on many of these migrant workers that come in looking for jobs that they can hop into real quickly and earn a paycheck. And we've done that for years in California. That's our bread and butter. In years past, though, the people that would come across the border, here's the biggest issue, right? We have to be able to identify and vet who is here. Some of the biggest issues that we're facing with those coming across the border is, look, we don't know who's here. And there needs to be a process where we identify and vet those who are coming in and working. Work visas, green cards, whatever you want to call it, that needs to be a streamlined process. I can tell you that I have visited with our migrant community all through. I have many undocumented people that are friends of mine. My job here, I don't believe, is to enforce immigration. I sometimes get criticized for that because, look, I'm the sheriff. That's a law, and you have to enforce the law. Well, I'm also the sheriff that has to provide public safety. If we have a family of 4 and they're victims of a violent crime and they're afraid to report that crime as a victim to law enforcement, then I'm not looking out for people, looking out for victims of crimes, those who have been violently raped or victims of domestic violence or child abuse or sex crimes. So I, as a sheriff, can't turn a blind eye to people being victims of very violent and horrible crimes. And then they would argue, well, when you get there, sheriff, you need to enforce the immigration. No, my job at that point is look out for the safety of that human being. So for a sheriff, it's really this balance between what has happened under Biden-Harris, which has completely exploded into chaos, and that of which that I need to look out for those who, are true victims.
So if immigration agents show up in Tulare County, what would be your role under current policies?
What I have directed is that we will not get in the way of federal law enforcement agents. We do not support the rounding up of just innocent migrant workers. But as long as you're here identifying wanted, known bad people, then you're welcome in the county.
I want to pivot real quick to a recent Cal Matters report you were quoted in. You said you don't support California's sanctuary state law. What part of that law do you oppose? How does that impact the jobs of your deputies?
Yeah, Senate Bill 54, I opposed it when it first came out. I was very vocal about it. I went in front of the Board of Supervisors and spoke openly in Sacramento, and I said, SB 54 is going to create problems for public safety. And here's what happened in times past. So, for example, if we would go out into the field and we ended up arresting somebody who was undocumented, We would come into the jail, we would stamp it as undocumented, proceed with the local state jurisdictional proceedings as far as prosecution, and then ICE would come into our jail once a day in the morning, and they would run through and take a look at all the people who were arrested the night before or all those who were in our custody. And they would take a look and identify those who they felt or were wanted people outside the United States and or wanted by the federal government or ICE, or they identified a crime where they needed to be held after their sentencing and prosecution, that they would be turned over to immigration. Senate Bill 54, what that says is that I am no longer allowed to share information from immigration. They're no longer allowed to come into my jails and look for those files. And what I said and what I proclaimed, and this is what's happening now, Senate Bill 54, I said, look, I as a sheriff, you're telling me that I can't have these guys in my jail to do their job. They're going to go into the community. I can't keep the federal government from going into our community and looking for people that are wanted, known suspects. What's going to happen is they have a job to do. So if they go into our community looking for a wanted subject, say they go to a house and they find this person that's wanted, but then you have a couple families there that are, migrant workers. They've got several children and they're all there undocumented. What's ICE's job? They're going to end up arresting that entire family because that's their job. I said, you guys are creating problems for the community because they're going to go into the community and do their job. They're going to look for a wanted person. But if they get there and there's ancillary federal law enforcement laws to enforce, they're going to do that too. So you've removed them from my jail and threw them into the community. So what you were hoping to keep from doing, you've created.
Anything else you'd like to add, Sheriff Boudreaux?
No, I just think that the narrative can get twisted to where fear carries the rumor, right? Fear carries the narrative versus what we're really trying to do here. We're looking out for public safety. We're looking out for being able to serve victims no matter what their immigration status is. But as reasonably thinking people, that has to be a better plan for the workers of California, the migrant workers of California. We've done it for years, right? Why can't we balance that so that they feel safe? We know who they are. They're vetted. They have the ability to drive around without worrying about being deported. There's an easy process for that. I think that I could make it happen in about 24 hours with a single sheet form, right? When politics gets involved and when you have these hard narratives that take place, you got the heart right that says everybody's got to go. You got the hard left who says everybody gets to stay. The reality of it is we have a very serious middle that no one is addressing.
That was my conversation with Tulare County Sheriff Mike Boudreaux. He was speaking with us about how he views his department's role in President Trump's immigration crackdown. And that does it for today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
We could all use a little help navigating the news these days. The Consider This podcast wants to give you a hand. 6 days a week, we'll help you make sense of the day's biggest news story and what it means for you in less than 15 minutes. Listen now to the Consider This podcast from NPR.